Chapter 1. The Deserted Manor. The storm roared outside, its ferocity reflecting the confusion swirling through John's head. He was in front of the dilapidated exterior of the long-abandoned Blackwood Manor, as the wind howled through the broken windows like the cries of the damned. He had only heard of it in whispers. It was a place steeped in fear and gloom. John had investigated the paranormal for many years and had encountered plenty of haunted homes and scary places. However, there was something about Blackwood Manor that gave him the chills. It was believed to be cursed. No one went there voluntarily, and those who did never came back. John had come here because he was curious and wanted to learn the truth about the legend. Whispers in the night, eerie apparitions, and a malicious spirit that appeared to be hiding behind the crumbling walls were just a few of the bizarre occurrences he had heard about. John crossed the threshold and entered the ominous interior of the manor, his tools in hand and a lamp casting a weak light into the inky darkness. The damaged walls were covered with cobwebs that hung like ominous tapestries, and the air was pungent with the smell of rot. John felt like he was being watched as he looked around the bottom floor. His movements appeared to be mocked by the creaking of the ancient wooden flooring as his footsteps reverberated through the empty rooms. It was as though the memories of everyone who had suffered there were embedded in the very walls. He discovered an ancient, dust and grime-covered painting of a woman with soulless, piercing eyes in the drawing room. He felt a cold go down his spine, yet he was unable to avert his attention. What mysteries did this abandoned place store, and who was she? The storm outside became worse with each passing second, releasing a furious downpour that rocked the windows and masked all other sounds. John made the decision to climb the rickety staircase leading to the top levels in an effort to solve the Blackwood Manor's secrets. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Night. With each step John took, the sense of dread became stronger since the higher levels of Blackwood Manor were much more run down than the main floor. Before him was a long, narrow corridor that was lined with shuttered doors that appeared to be concealing something horrible. John's lamp wavered as he moved down the hallway, throwing unsettling shadows that danced across the walls. He couldn't help but notice that the temperature had dropped and the mansion had become eerily still, with only the distant crack of thunder to break the calm. John paused as he walked up to one of the doors, hesitating as he grabbed for the handle. He could feel the past of the manor, a history drenched in gloom and desolation bearing down on him. He took a deep breath before opening the door and going inside. It was a bedroom that had been abandoned for a while and had worn-out drapes. The bed was not made, suggesting that the previous resident had gone quickly, and the dresser's mirror was broken, with its pieces all over the floor. John was drawn to the ethereal muttering, a chorus of unidentified voices that appeared to emanate from all sides of the room. The voices were urgent, but the words were hazy, like they were being said in a language he couldn't understand. While searching the space for the source of the murmurs, he lifted his lantern. Then in the shattered pieces of the glass, he caught a glimpse of them, shadowy beings moving in the night, their bodies distorted and twisted, their eyes flashing with malice. John retreated in fear as his heart raced, as if they were attempting to send a message from the afterlife. The whispers became louder and more urgent. John was unable to understand the message, but he was convinced of one thing. Blackwood Manor was not your typical haunted mansion, and the darkness within was far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. Chapter 3. The Unearthly Apparitions. John's heart raced and he started to perspire as the disturbing words resounded around the room. In the faint light of his candle, the ghostly creatures in the shattered mirror appeared to be getting closer as they writhed and contorted. John held his paranormal investigative tools, a camera, an electromagnetic field, EMF detector, and a voice recorder, as his desperation overcame his dread. He had to take notes about what was happening in order to record proof of the supernatural apparitions that were all around him. He shook his hands and turned on his EMF detector, which lighted up with a flurry of activity right away. The measurements of the electromagnetic field were quite high, giving the impression that a strong force was at work in the space. John strained to stay composed as the voices got louder, nearly deafening. He looked around for his camera and started taking pictures of the mirror, catching the spectral shapes as they twisted and spun. But as his camera's flash lighted up the space, the ghosts retreated and vanished into the shadows. John was left alone in the space, his mind and heart still racing. Despite the fact that the foreboding mood had subsided, He was aware that Blackwood Manor's evil presence remained. He looked over the pictures he had shot, eager to learn the truth. He could just make out the faces of the shadowy beings on the photographs, their features contorted in agony and misery. It served as a terrible reminder that the ghosts imprisoned behind these walls were tortured souls, their misery tied to this vengeful location forever. John spoke a query to the empty room while his voice recorder was on in an effort to record an EVP, a communication from the other side. After a little period of silence, a voice that was whispering in an unearthly language and sending chills down his spine finally broke through the static in the room. John was unable to ignore the seriousness of the situation after hearing what sounded like an imploring voice pleading for his freedom. Beyond anything he had encountered in his years as a paranormal investigator, Blackwood Manor harbored sinister secrets. Chapter 4: The Ghost of the Past. John was haunted by the ghostly sightings and the mysterious message he had recorded, and he realized he needed to learn more about Blackwood Manor's past in order to solve the puzzles surrounding the haunted manor. Returning to the bottom level, where the stifling quiet had been replaced by a constant rhythmic tapping, he climbed the rickety staircase. He had not yet opened the closed door that the noise appeared to come from. He approached the door cautiously and discovered it was unlocked. A chilly wind gust that smelled of wet ground and rotting wood swept past him as he pulled the door wide. He found a secret study within that was filled with antique texts and dusty old volumes. The tapping was coming from a pendulum clock that was swinging wildly, as if it were being manipulated by an invisible hand. It seemed as though time itself had been warped within these walls because of the atmosphere of the chamber, which was heavy with an unearthly presence. John's attention was drawn to one specific book among the manuscripts and volumes. It was a journal with aged, discolored pages that said, Eleanor Blackwood. He started reading and soon learned the terrible past of the house and its previous occupants. The original owner of the house, a prosperous businessman by the name of Victor Blackwood, had been Eleanor's father. The diary detailed her spiral into madness and the eerie voices that spoke to her in the night and tormented her dreams. She said that the house was home to a malicious spirit that exacted a heavy price for its influence. As John read Eleanor's description of the entity's requirements, a string of terrifying rites, each more gruesome than the previous, his heart plummeted. She had been driven insane by the deal, which had also taken her life. As he read further, John came to the conclusion that the being Eleanor had described was quite similar to the evil force he had experienced within Blackwood Manor. The cursed home had evolved into a prison for the spirits of its deceased residents, who were chained by a sinister power that thrived off of their pain. John realized he had to face the thing head-on if he was going to rescue these tortured spirits and break the curse that had dogged Blackwood Manor for generations. But as time went on, the evil presence in the house grew more powerful, and the concluding scene of his inquiry would include a struggle of wills between the living and the dead.